Yes, I do. When they're on, I have them stand up and get recognized. Is he the only one?
He's the only one that I know of. I don't even think of
And the other ones are here just
They're
for...
for the courses. and
Oh,
course
cool,
proposals.
cool.
You ready?
Yep.
Hello, I'd like to call our regular meeting to order. It's 6:01 PM. I invite everybody to stand for the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first up, we have our approval of our meeting agenda. May I have a motion? Thank you, Christy. May I have a second? Thanks, Randy. All those in favor? All right, so that motion passes. So next up, we'd like to have a moment of silence for Vesta Lewis, starting as a teaching assistant at CSI on September 4th, 1974. She retired on June 20th, 2004, with 30 years. Dave Plateau, a school monitor at Paul V. Moore High School. He retired on January 16th, 2015, with 12 years. And Susan Dashnaw, custodial worker at Central Square Middle School. She retired on December 30th, 2015, with 19 years. Mr. James Baker, social studies teacher from February 1970 to July 2001. He retired with 31 years. So we'll have a moment of silence for those people. Thank you. So next up on our agenda is item C. Pearl, do we have any pink forms? Okay, so no pink forms tonight. So moving right along to item D, special presentations to the board. We have our capital project update. And I'll invite our King and King Architects to come on up and talk to us about that. And Turner Construction.
Hello, everyone. Turner's gonna kick this thing off, and then I'll take the tail end of this, so.
Sure. Just real quick introductions, just for those of you, I know a lot of you. Chris Graham with Turner Construction, Project Executive.
I'm Jess Wynn, and I'm an engineer with Turner Construction.
I'm Dakota Philly, and I'm assistant engineer with Turner Construction.
So you probably know the Pats. So we're shifting a little bit with Dakota and Jess coming on board here for as we go into phase 2. So I think Jess was going to just walk us through a little bit in terms of where we are construction-wise.
Yes.
If we can jump that one. Here, we get it here.
Yep.
Gotta turn it on. There's a...
On the side right there.
There we go. Right, just to jump it off with the high school, big note here is just construction is complete, punch list is currently underway, and the team's currently working and coordinating with the contractors towards closeout, which is currently slated for fall of 2024. Hastings Mallory, big component here, the septic system, we are substantially complete. The engineers come out to site and inspected the system, and it's currently in use. Site work is substantially complete. We have some punch list items still remaining. Classroom renovations are complete with the UVs and the casework. They are installed. Flooring is currently underway and it's currently scheduled for the next coming weeks. Our HVAC system is complete. System is currently running. The last component of that is going to be the replacement of the boilers, which is currently slated for May of 2024, once weather gets a little bit warmer. And in totality for Hastings Mallory, we're currently looking for a phased reoccupancy plan that will enable Paul to start bringing furnishings back into the building starting in April. And then just middle school here, a majority of this work is currently anticipated to start summer of 2024. And then just some updated photos of the high school. So we've got the bus loop and the parent drop-off that was completed this past summer. Hastings Mallory, we've got the basketball courts, as well as the septic system that was just recently finished. When you drive by, there is still some site work that needs to be completed that will be done this upcoming summer. And then inside the building itself, you got the casework installations with the new UVs. Photos not too glamorous just because our flooring is still not installed just yet. And then just some new bathroom fixtures in a handful of the bathrooms that we have renovated.
Just so everybody knows, it's not an open concept. We'll do all. Just when they Paul first said it's amazing, it's very meticulous, didn't like what they were doing to the tiling, made them take them down, but yeah, it's not like a prison bathroom.
No,
No.
there'll be partitions, yeah. Yep.
And I'll pass it over to Kirk.
All right. Any questions about the construction so far? All right, so what's next? Well, as you all know, our friends down at SED are doing what they typically do, and that is slow everything down. So the lead times now for review is around 6 months. We kind of gathered that there was this potential that this was going to happen, and if you recall, they had the third-party review process the last time they got to the 6 month, and they disbanded that, and we knew it was going to go back there, and it did, but they're not going to correct it. So we're going to be in this cycle for a while. Unfortunately, there's a pretty big backlog of projects that are down at SED, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. So in any case, we had planned for it, but our project, the phase 2 work has been sitting down at SED for 6 months, and we should be getting approval any time now. So that's what we're anticipating. So this next scope of work that we're going to be bidding this spring is really for what we're calling the phase 2 scope. It's the same work that we had always identified for the phase 2 work. I just want to point out that the words in blue are scope of work that we've identified as alternates. So remember, when we started this adventure with the project scope, we were concerned about the budget and the inflation, and the inflation is 3 times what we expected it to be. We're looking in the construction industry anywhere from 20 to 40% increases in materials and labor over the last 2-year period of time that since we voted this project. So again, there's only so much this team can anticipate with that. And honestly, we've done a really good job of protecting that budget and scope of work. But what you see, because this is the last piece of this component of work, are those items that were on the lower end of the priority list anyways. And we're identifying them as alternates, meaning we've designed all of that work, and we're going to bid it, and we're going to see how those prices come in at the time. So it is possible that some of those components in blue may not end up getting done, depending on where we land with that bidding process. Right now, we're starting to get some bids in on projects that are out there. The prices seem to be pretty stabilized right now. It's all going to be dependent on timing and where the contracting pool in this area ends up running into the summer months. So we're keeping an eye on it. The great thing is we've got Turner and the rest of us that are doing this work all over. So we're doing our best to keep our eye on the target here and keeping these things under control. So I'm not going to read through all the components, but the scope of work at each of the buildings is exactly what we anticipated from the beginning of this. It's just that those blue items are the ones that are right now in the alternate category. And we're not going to know until we actually get to opening bids where we stand with those, and then the team will make the decision on where best we can allocate the dollars and whether we can buy those into the project or not. And then really the rest of the items at the maintenance center, bus garage and stuff is really just boiling down to the alternate with the ventilation improvements. So overall, we're still on exactly the same schedule and timeline that we've been on from the beginning. So as Jess just mentioned, the Hastings-Mallory move is going to start happening in that April timeframe. And then the A. Cole work will then commence after, during the summer, so that we move them in that next phase, basically the same kind of schedule or cycle. Completely dependent on the SED review and when we can get that work rolling. So that's where we're at.
question, I just have a comment that the two, Turner Construction and King work so well together. But again, hats off to Paul Brissett and the collaboration in your frequent meetings. So when Paul said, hey, Tom, I've got a way in the current phase to be able to pull the painting out of the bid and have his crew do that, and then being able to take care of some of the other things, that's just a testament to the communication that Turner and King, but what Paul brings to the group is just invaluable.
Yes.
You're welcome.
So next item up on the agenda is our data presentation by Ms. Erin Phillips.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So same format. Kindergarten, we're going to kind of go quick because nothing really has changed. Everything is the same. Just now we've got the beginning of the year, and then that second line is where our kids are now in January. Testing started the week after we got back from Christmas vacation. So there's some good progress. A few kids, and remember the standard moves up at each benchmark. So if students aren't making the, staying on par with getting to that point, you're going to see some kids slide back. So we are watching that, and we are, giving feedback to those teachers of how we can kind of push them and continue to move those kids who are on the right half, so those green and blue students. But definitely not as many students moving from blue to green this time. One or two is kind of meant to, it's not a horrible thing. They're still proficient. They're still moving in the right track and the right trajectory. And with a little nudge, we'll get to, hopefully maintain that. So that is feedback that is being given to the teachers who service those upper echelon kids. And then some nice movement in kindergarten at our lower level. So at the beginning of the year, a lot of kids coming into kindergarten tested out of certain subtests because they weren't ready yet for those skills. So at this point in the year, we've got all the kids now testing in all the standards, and some kids are testing out because they get to a point where they've already mastered that skill, so they no longer utilize that assessment band. So that's a good thing to see that happen. So here's that phoneme segmentation part. This is where our main focus is for kindergarten. So the kids are making some growth, and then what starts to happen is students who start to really get into that reading part of kindergarten curriculum, they're moving past, so some of that phonological awareness, which is your foundational standards and skills, they're more advanced, so sometimes that slips a little bit because they're past that. So we still are strengthening that, but it doesn't become as big of a focus for them because they're actually into reading books now and not just focusing on what the sounds and manipulating sounds, but they're actually like being able to decode things. So they are moving, and our students are, in our kindergarten level, moving in the right direction with this. So we had 36 students at Millard Hawk, for example, that really couldn't do this skill at the beginning of the year, and now we've just got about 11. 3 of them are moving in the right, they've moved up from that. So that's some, and then they've made a ton of growth because 12 of them are blue. So we went from 36 red to 11. So that's a good, that's a good number. And then we get to the sound. So this is where that next level is. So now they're actually putting sounds to letters and actually starting to decode books, and they're getting into readers now, even if it's not quite the skills reader yet, because that's going to be starting at the end of this month. But there are some groups that are into decodable readers. So you can see those the blue kids stayed blue, so that's good, and then the greens have moved some kids to blue, so it's a good problem to have, for sure. First grade, again, they're composite scores. So again, the schools and where they were at. This is the grade level that you saw right now, kids testing out. So they've got some of that phoneme segmentation part, they've got that solid, so they test out and they move on to some harder level skills. We switch, so now they're not sounding out the words. We want them to look at a nonsense word and just be able to read it. So it's a shift in skills. They still take the correct letter sounds, which was the one on the kindergarten slide, but this is where you really are a reader when you can look at a word that doesn't make sense and you have that code, we call it, so that they can just read a nonsense word. There's still students who are sounding them out. But that's okay because they still have the letter sounds. We got to get them into blending a little bit more. But this is, and they do get credit. So if they read, they sound out the 3 sounds and then they put it all together, they still get credit for that. But because they're sounding it out, they go a little bit slower rather than just looking at it and being able to automatically rattle it off. So, so this is the one area though where we really want our first graders to, this is the one I pay attention to the most. Our second grade, and really at second grade, we really start to look at the oral reading fluency aspect of things. So we do have a lot of second graders who are still working on those sounds and really the other part, but this is like our end goal. So that's why I've got this one on here as we really start to look in second grade at our ORF. So that's their oral reading fluency. So how well and accurately do they read a passage? So this is a struggle for some, and we're trying to, figure that out because they are still working on the sound piece of things. So it's that decoding part that gets some kids hung up. So that's an area that we are working on across the district is our second grade group. Third through fifth, so this is a little bit different. So the composite 1, composite 2, and then the oral reading fluency 1 and 2. So this is put together by one of our district psychologists. So they look at all the data across the district and kind of compile it. So this is where our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students are and the growth that they have made. Some start a little bit lower with the composite score and move. So the yellow to green or yellow to yellow and they're moving up is good. So you can see like at Cole for 3rd grade, they were the lowest going in. They made, a nice chunk of improvement. They're still yellow because they came in so low. They've kind of got a lot to make up, but they're moving in the right direction. Middle school, 6th grade, this is, again, the ORF, that's what we pay attention to. So the blue is just like the Dibble stuff. They use it, they don't have, M-Class, the program we use does not go through 8th grade. So the middle school has worked with Chris Martin on doing a data studio, but they align the colors to the same thing that the elementary uses. So you can see this, and in talking with Travis, he said the kids in January were not as thrilled, I would say, with doing this test, and that's not really indicative of what they're seeing in their reading groups that they have, so in intervention and AIS groups, and that their QPS definitely looked different than their fluency part. So we just had a reading meeting today, and we're talking about some of this data and some of this slide that we see in January.
Erin, so just, you mentioned intervention and AIS, so is this data only associated with students that are in those programs, or is this the entire 6th grade class?
This is the entire 6th grade class.
Okay, just because obviously the numbers, I hear what you're saying, they weren't thrilled about the test, but it looks like the total for the greens and blues remained exactly the same, and obviously the yellows dropped significantly and the reds went up significantly, and so aside from not being thrilled about the test, You know, are they noticing any patterns with the students that aren't in intervention and AIS? Because you said those students are seeing improvement, and this may be not reflecting, but we don't know which of these students are in AIS and
Right.
intervention versus the ones that are in general
Right, this is their
education
entire
classes. And
cohort.
those yellows and reds that are added could have been, you know, general population
Right.
type students, whereas the blues and greens could have been those intervention students that jumped. So I didn't
Right.
know if digging deeper, if you guys.
So
were-
that's the conversation that we had today, and Travis wasn't at our reading meeting because he's got the spelling screener that they gave, and he has their QPS stuff to know where these numbers are. So we kind of paused that meeting until he could be there because he's the kind of keeper of it. Because those are the same questions that we kind of talked about today in the groups and things.
And, I mean, don't mistake it. I know you're
Yeah.
way on top of this, but obviously I'm sure those numbers are concerning to you as well.
Oh, yeah.
But us sitting here without having the ability to
Yep.
dig down, I just wanted,
Yep, and that's what we talked about today, because they talked about maybe trying to start some groupings earlier for scheduling purposes, and I said, well, when you look at the regression, I don't want, and Travis is saying that the kids didn't maybe put their best foot forward.
Well, and that's the hardest thing is when kids take 3 minutes to take an assessment. It's like, guys,
Right.
come on. Yeah, I mean, and so they know it doesn't count for the report card. Anytime you have them do an assessment like that, it's really difficult to see what they're capable of doing when they should be spending way more time doing it. You can just tell it's not a concern to them.
Right. And one of the, when we go back to the 3, 4, 5 stuff, one of the big pushes that we're trying to get the kids to do, because we noticed that the teachers were doing a lot of the reading to them. So this was a big deal at the beginning of the year to have the kids read it. And now that they're reading more of the content, which it should be that way, some of these units are taking longer. So I think that is, we have to account for that, because for the last few years, we've compensated a little bit, right? Like, we want to be able to have conversations, but if the kids can't read at a rate that's appropriate, then they're going to get hung up in their writing, and everything else is going to be be impacted by that too. So we really kind of have to shift that and trust that the kids can do it. It's just a matter of, and yes, it will take a little bit longer until they get their fluency up to where it needs to be, but the classes that I have been in, they are doing that. And sometimes we've got to have a balance, because some lessons require parts of the lesson to be read to the kids because they're going to get more into some question and higher level thinking. So there just has to be a balance. Like, it's not all, one or the other. It's a little bit of both. So I think, in my opinion, that is why some of these scores are a little bit, the rates of improvement are moving a little bit more this year, because the more kids read, the better they get at it. Between the ELA class and the reading class, we're trying to really kind of decipher which role is which. What is the reading teacher going to do versus what is the ELA teacher going to really work on, so that we start to see some of this change and there's not as much there. So a work in progress, but Travis has a lot of this
I
stuff.
took the correlation, if you go back, and I don't know if I'm right or not, the fifth grade growth scores, right? Because you have good in third and fourth grade, but then as fifth grade, it seems like you didn't get the numbers or didn't get the growth. And that to me, is that indicative of
What they've
your-
done the last few years.
Right, and then you go to your sixth, you go to the next slide, and then, and then things started to fall off. So I didn't know if there was when I looked at it, I didn't know if there was a correlation between the two or
Yeah.
not.
Well, definitely, because these kids who are in sixth grade, right?
Right.
And then when you look at the seventh grade information, right, same. And that was a big part last year, is the kids being, read to. So,
Do you capture the data from where they started in the fall and where they landed on their assessment for the winter? As far as a student that may have been blue that fell off, did they fall to yellow, did they fall to red?
So this one's a little bit trickier to use, but we have it. We can see them. When the teachers go into our M class in this, so I can click on that, let's just say the AA Cole's green 15. I can click on that blue section, and it will populate who those students are that moved. And same thing with the, if they were, so Hastings Mallory is yellow, the 12 yellow, I can click on that red box and see who those kids are that moved down, and we can actually see what mistakes they made on their actual assessment, so it shows us right there what the errors were.
If there's any kind of common outcome of where they're landing for those that are falling off.
Yeah, and that's where this is just the reading fluency, so then you see, okay, is their code not what it needs to be? So they're still working on some of that work, and the text is a little bit higher and a little bit more difficult, and they're just not there yet, where at the beginning of the year, it's a little bit easier, so they were more able to manage it. But that's what Travis really kind of hones in on and looks at to see, okay, are kids slipping? What is their STAR score? What is their, what are all these other data points they use? Do we need to make adjustments? Do they need an extra level of support? Or, because that's what they're all doing, revamping groups and things the last few weeks. So that is exactly what they do up there.
Yeah, because I think too, because then if you look at the state assessment scores that come in, so to me, they're all legs on a stool, right? And all these different data points. You just try to see if there's a pattern, because there's a difference. Yeah, there was a difference between the state assessment scores, if I have it right, because it's been a couple weeks since I looked at it, since it came out, AA Cole struggled, and then, but, to me, it's one snapshot, could be a bad day, it could be a lot of reasons, but if you have the ability to drill down and then to really see what, what's going on and what's happening, I think that, the growth, to me, and how many are you losing compared to the beginning of the year? Are you seeing that improvement?
Right.
Because if they're not good in third, and they're struggling in fourth, there's nothing magical that's going to happen up through the grade points. So to me, it's always been my thing. Third grade reading scores. It's kind of been my thing for the last.
Yeah, and Mike and I talked about the information at Cole, especially with his second grade, because that's been his grade level that has had a lot of turnover the last handful of years. And the really hard part is Cole, in particular, struggles for subs, and I truly think it's because it's the furthest school out there. So on any given day, you've been covering, so on any given day, they're cutting AIS, because AIS teachers end up having to cover a classroom. So I talked to Mike, I'm like, okay, how can you get creative? And it might be maybe having to combine classes so that your kids who are struggling to read the most aren't getting their services. That's problematic. So what can we do differently to prevent that from happening so the kids continue to get their services? And the AIS teachers are on a rotating basis, so that it's not always the same group of kids missing, but any 4 days it's going to be. So, and he's going to work with his reading coach to really kind of go in and get a 3,000-foot view of what kind of is taking place. And there's two, there's one constant and two new ones. Same with some of this middle school stuff is what is happening, and that's been a conversation that Matt and Travis and I have been having in John Condrict, is what's that tier 1 look like? Because it's not all these kids receive intervention support. So what's happening in the classroom? And when you look at some of our state test scores, when you really break it down, we lose a lot of points in the writing aspect of things. So we've got a district-wide committee, the Writing Revolution, that we are looking at how can we bring this to improve our students' writing across the board. And as they write more, it helps their reading too, so it'll help both sides of that, state test. But, you talk to high school teachers, because we've got people from all levels on that committee, and the high school sees it up here. So really trying to pick some strategies that we can roll out district-wide that will help the reading and the writing aspect of things. But like on our elementary benchmarks, we aren't chasing the 4-point answer because our kids can't answer the 2-point questions. So we really have to solidify that. And as the kids get better at answering those, then those harder essays will come. But that's where we lose a lot of our points.
And I think there's always, especially if you set the culture, is that if all the groundwork is there, the scores will be there, right? You don't want to chase the score.
Right.
I don't see any advantage to it. And having an understanding, and they don't put this out statewide on the internet.
Right.
Right? They put the state scores. They evaluate, it's, every time it's in the news, you know, everybody goes to it, that's what you go to. But to me, there's more to the story
Yeah.
than just that one test.
Yep. And then 8th grade looks good. It's kind of like the kids figure themselves out a little bit in 8th grade, and they get a little bit more mature, and they take things a little bit more serious. And that's kind of what we saw last year, too, with their 8th grade scores. So that's that. Any other questions? All right.
All right, next item up on our agenda is Miss Maureen Ladd, our business manager, coming up for our budget presentation.
Do you want to start? Let's go with fiscal stress first. Yeah. And it's kind of a lot for one night, and I wanted to do 2 more, and Tom said I couldn't. I know, it gets bad. I wanted to first hit the fiscal stress scores, just because this has been in the paper. It was probably 3 weeks ago now. What this is, it's a system put out by the State Comptroller's Office where they give us scores on various data points, really, to try to indicate whether we're going to be going into fiscal stress or you are in fiscal stress. And there's setups for all municipalities, cities, towns, villages, and school districts. Basically, they have 2 sets of information that they put indicators on, the financial and the environmental. The financial indicators are obviously the ones that you know, we talk about them. It's the year-end fund balance, your operating deficits or surpluses, cash positions, and if any reliance on short-term cash flow debt, which that one we never have a score on. We have not done that since I've been here. The environmental indicators are a little less in our control. Essentially, your percentage of economically disadvantaged, class size, teacher turnover, the change in the property value, the budget vote approval rate, and the percentage of English language learners that are there in our district. So this is, the top line is the fiscal stress, and underneath it gives you the scores and where you stand depending on where you score. And the green lines are the environmental indicators and the same designations. Now, we have no designation, and we haven't had any, but this year our fiscal stress score stayed the same at 6.7, and our environmental went up 5 points, which I can tell you what that is in a little bit. And I just like this program because you can get in here and look at it and compare yourself to the rest of the school districts in all of the state. There's 669 scored, and in Central New York, they consider 48 districts to be Central New York, and median and upstate is about, I don't know, a third or so of the districts. So this is our fund balance indicator, and then as we stand against all schools, we're about half Central New York schools and the median of the state. Total fund balance is a percentage of gross expenditures is another one of the indicators. It basically shows the same scenarios. The operating surplus deficit, ours was negative. This is based on last year's numbers, 22, 23, because remember, we moved money, basically expense money, moved it over into the capital account towards the project. And our cash investments against our current liabilities, and our cash as a percentage of our monthly expenditures. So these are our fiscal stress scores as we stand against the same set of school districts. And I believe only like 24 districts across the state were in fiscal distress across the 3 other categories. The environmental indicators are economically disadvantaged. It's basically your free and reduced lunch percentage, the 46%. All schools average around 43. We're right on track with the rest of Central New York in the median. And the student-to-teacher ratio, we're a little bit higher, and we do reach a score here because 12 is where you hit a score, so we're 0.9 into that scoring. And we're always a little bit higher because we're so large. We have a bigger denominator. We're always going to have a little better class size. Teacher turnover rate, we're a little higher than the Central New York, but not by much. The change in property values, we all are increasing, and we're increasing a little bit less than Central New York schools. We really don't have a lot of properties. It's give or take mostly residentials. Our voter approval is higher, and our English language learners are much lower than the average. So basically, this is where you stand with where we stand with the environmental stress score, but this is the 22 that they've got on here. Our 23 is at 15, which still has no designation. So you can take this program and project it out with the, you basically take your numbers right off your ST3s and project another year. And so we can see where we stand if we do certain things. So I'm looking at using some fund balance for next year, obviously, because we know our revenues are going to be down. So it gives us a little bit of a predictor on that. You can kind of see by doing that, we're going to level down on all of the categories. But we still won't score. So we'll still be in good standing. So I'd just like to go through that. I don't know if anybody ever sees it or brings it up at any of your places, at your conferences, but we do look at it. It's a good set of indicators. Do I do revenue next, Pearl? So as you know, and we've been hearing on the news, Hochul came out with a budget on January 16th. She's trying to close a gap at the state level. And so I just put these quotes up here because I know you've been seeing it. Council of School Supers says that, the proposal reduces the foundation aid called for the formula by $400 million. ASBO basically says concerning on the numbers, the proposals, and school boards too, basically are saying that appears to be pulling back from the substantial progress that was being made on foundation aid. I'm just going to throw some highlights up here. State aid increase is $507 million. It's about a 2.1% increase on the overall package. It reduces by $400 million the foundation aid level that's been called for by the formula that's now in the law that we're having the last couple of years. It does include full funding of the reimbursable aids, which that's always a thing. Sometimes they threaten that they're going to cap those items. Inflation factor is reduced from 4.1% to 2.4%, and that's part of what's causing the foundation aid formula to go down. Well, I shouldn't say go down, not go up as high as it should based on the calculations. And it eliminates safe harmless, which there's always been in foundation aid. If the formula brings you less aid, you still get a percentage increase. And that's now gone. So there are many districts out there that do not have an increase right now in the foundation aid. It also repeals the COVID-19 sick leave law. It does have continued funding for PTEC, and it does have some funding towards the school meal program. Right now, it's not as much as it is this year, but it does supplement the federal nutrition program to some degree. It doesn't include the retiree income waiver, which is the one where we've been able to hire retired people and they don't have the cap on what they make. And it doesn't include funding for prior period adjustments. And I put what we have sitting out there in the queue, we currently have unpaid adjustments at just over $700,000. And it's crazy because foundation, all the calculations on all the various formulas that run inside all of the aid categories get reconciled like about 4 times over the course of 2 or 3 years, depending on what you actually spend, what things happen. So we were on the docket back in 2012 for a refund of $294,000 and change. It's still sitting there. Right. So, and think about this. And then we had one in 2014, we had one in 2016, and a couple of them. But if you owe, it comes out of your next aid payment. Yep. So that one is important to us because we have some money sitting out there, which would be nice if we could get it. Okay. What do our numbers look like? This is what you saw, what came probably on your emails, and you've seen it all over the place. This is the state aid proposal for Central Square. It compares 23 to 24. And as you can see, the top line, the blue foundation aid, we do still have an aid increase of about 4.5%. Our building aid is looking like it's going down. Transportation aid, pretty even. BOCES aid going up. Private and public access costs are basically the special ed monies that flow through for those students. And then on the bottom are they're expense-based aids. And so those are based on pupil population. So they've been slowly decreasing because we still are just becoming stable with our population.
Maureen,
And the universal pre-K is always there too. Yep.
why did the pre-K go up more than double?
It won't. You won't see that. They're that much.
I'm not upset about it, I just was
No, and it's
wondering.
not gonna happen. That much money is what's available to Central Square if we were to do full-day pre-K, and we have not started that yet. So our number will be closer to the 431, because that's all we'll be eligible for our half-day pre-K programs that we have.
Okay, but with that, then our total expense-based aids actually went down.
Correct. So this is what,
Okay.
this is what's on the run that shows in the paper.
I got you.
What you have to think about is this 23-24 column
Yep.
is not our budget from last year. So it's truly not what we're comparing ourselves to.
Okay.
So then, this is where I go and put it against our actual adopted budgets. So you can see the numbers are different. Our building aid looks like it's going down even more against the aid number that we have in our budget right now, the current budget that we're sitting in. Because you got to remember, every one of these numbers is changing all the time in the background. So, and just because they run a set of numbers, it does not mean that we will get that set of numbers. So this is what it truly looks like against our current budget that we're using right now without UPK, because UPK is a grant and it is not in our general fund budget. This is about a 3.5% increase in our budget. That being said, I can tell you, just standing here, and I've obviously done some work on it, the building aid projected number that's there is low because we have projects in the queue. And by the time we get to the end of next year, we will have submitted finals on the ones that are ending now, and we will generate more aid. And that'll come in line better with our operating expenses. And the BOCES aid is high. There was some numbers in the BOCES system that generated a higher number, and they've been doing some work on that, and they've sent out new numbers that are more appropriate for us. So when you do see the budget next month, you're not going to see their proposed numbers. We're going to have, some different ones. The number that's generally decent is the foundation aid, which is the big number. The rest of them are being generated by formulas that are based on what we are actually doing.
Yeah, and Maureen, at the last board meeting, you talked about it would be a great windfall at 7%, right? Mm-hmm. And at the 3.5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're
I
running.
don't want to get ahead of your
Yeah,
slides.
we're
but-
going to be running a little short, for sure. I will be using a couple of other items, I'm hoping, and I'll talk about one of them in the property tax cap. So this, I think you have all seen it possibly, but I like this analysis that the school boards puts out. It compares our numbers to what it should have been if the formula was running. And so we're short on foundation aid, just over $500,000. So there's still hope to get this money, because there's a fight going on right now. You guys have all heard about it. So we could potentially get more building aid. And the other piece of this that they put out, which I really like, is this is our aid indicators, the pieces that run some of these formulas against what they were back in 1920. So our enrollment has declined, our combined wealth ratio has declined. We're still an average need district. I tell you that all the time, I know, but because I think people think we're high needs every time you hear that stuff. But our free and reduced lunch has gone up. Our census, our poverty census remains about the same, and we have started having some ELL students in the system. They're not all at 100%, but they tick up if you look at some of the numbers that we have.
And then, Maureen, have you looked at what she's been proposing for the new formula that she's proposing? Have you looked at that? And I don't want to put you on the spot,
No.
but
Me personally, no, but like ASBO and school boards run those numbers, so I can see what it's doing to our numbers.
Right.
And there's another place, it's called Questar, but it's a state aid planning service that we use, that all districts use. And they generally, once some of these things come out, they'll run it to the best of their ability, and you'll get numbers to see like where you stand and what it is.
I just don't trust what she's saying and
Well,
what she's trying to do.
Yeah, and it's hard because if you can say something like as a generalization, but like this, there's 700 districts, so it's not gonna work for everybody. So
Yeah,
there's, and that's
well,
where.
if you're a rural district, you'll
Right.
get more money, and I don't know where that definition falls when you're talking about us, and I just,
Yep, and we're,
it's worrisome, because, there's some districts that don't really rely on state aid. We rely on it very heavily here, so
Yeah.
it just puts us in jeopardy, I think.
yeah. What I'm really hoping is that they will go run the formula correctly, so we'll get at least another $500,000. I'm gonna not try, if you'll approve of it, I'm gonna use some money out of our debt service towards our debt. And then I think we'll use we've had health insurance money in there for years when we changed from the minimum premium so I'm thinking we'd try to use some of that too and see, spend the year to see what shakes out with the positions that we want to keep, and we'll go with that. There's one more, there's property tax cap. I'm sorry. I wanted to show you this tonight because I have to file this by March 1st. So basically, it's been, 12 years now with the property tax cap? So basically what it is, it limits the total levy that school districts can assess. And it leaves us with, basically, every district is subject to it except for the independent school districts in the Big Four. So basically, it gives us a convoluted formula that we have to use to know what our tax levy limit is. Steve, this is an old slide. They haven't updated it for this year. But to your point, the blue or the purple, this is statewide school district income. Most schools rely more than 50% on property taxes and less on state aid. So we are basically the opposite of what the bulk of districts are, the majority of the districts. So property tax cap is almost less impacting to us than it is on most schools because they get the majority of their income on the other side of the scale. It's a convoluted formula, just like everything is, but you start with your levy from this year, you put a growth factor on there, which is supposed to give us money for the assessment increase potentially in your district. And then there's a allowable growth factor on that. Your pilots go in and out, you have carryovers, and then there's exclusions for your capital. And for us, basically, it's the capital that we have. and this is how you run the formula, which I won't even get into that. This is our formula. So if you take, right now this year, the 23-24 levies at 30,773,000 and change, and you run all the factors through there, you get down to the tax levy limit, and then you put your exclusion, your capital exclusion on there. When I run it that way, our tax levy limit is at 7.65%. Now, obviously, that's high, and we wouldn't want to go out with that. So I'm going to propose that we transfer $650,000 in from the debt service fund. And I'm picking that number specifically because that's the interest that we're going to be paying on the bond anticipation note next year that will be in the budget. So because we have to use debt service money specifically for debt service. And that gets us more closer to a 5.5%. And then, of course, everybody wants to know, what does that mean? Which I get. Basically, 3 items make up tax rate. When you get your bill, you're looking at a tax rate on your bill, not the levy. The levy is only one piece of it. Town assessments and equalization rates make up the difference. So if we, on the right here, April, these are starting down at the bottom and moving up. This is what we estimated our tax rate to be every year. And as you can see, it's going down, and would go down significantly for next year. What actually happens is different, because what actually is the tax rate is what happens in August when we levy the taxes. That's when we know what the assessments are and we know what the equalization rates are. So what has actually happened is we started 7 years ago, we were at $18.90 per thousand. We currently are down to $14.08 per thousand. And that's a factor of not increasing taxes over the last 3 years.
This is going to be one of the most important slides when I do my roadshow, because when you look at other districts, their tax cap is significantly lower because they go out year after year, the highest they can get from their people. So when we went 2 straight years without raising the tax levy, some people would actually look at that as a bad thing, because now when you come out and you say, okay, this is what we're going to go at, still not our thing. Well, they went 2 straight years without raising the taxes. But again,
Yeah, and we didn't go to the cap last year either.
no, we
remember?
didn't. And
Yeah.
so that right there, where the 1890, 2017, and then the 1408, 2324, that's huge. And the community needs to understand that.
Right, but a big part of that, Maureen, I believe, based on seeing what comes home on my actual tax bills, is over those same years where it was dropping significantly, the local towns were increasing the equalization rates. So, if your house was at 100,000 and we didn't increase school taxes, and now your house is at 120,000, but your value of the house didn't really change, it was the equalization rate kind of business that they were doing. It was kind of like a double whammy by not raising the taxes here and them increasing the value. This 5% or whatever could potentially make a substantial jump, because now it's being applied against the value of a home that's much higher than it was 5 years ago.
But technically, the equalization rate is supposed to be taking care of that, because you know what I mean, that's where but what happens is every year, because we tax across 11 towns, so every year, 1 or 2 or 3 of those townships does a reeval. And so then those ones get hurt the most because they're adjusted. Like I went and looked at my taxes this year versus last year, and they were they really were less. But when you don't actually pull out your bills like for the last 4 years and look at them, because if you have the same assessment, they will be less. If anything else has changed, then it won't show that way. Yep. Yep. Right. But right.
If you've been doing that all along, but when you're applying it to $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 more of home value in the same exact home you were in 3 years ago,
Yep.
then it makes it
Right.
Which is
But
everywhere.
I've
been hit 3 years in a row with an increase in my tax. Right.
But also because with those jumps, and we're not increasing the levy, we're basically leaving that on the table, so to speak. So what actually does 5.4% mean? It's basically an estimated right now, based on this year's actual of $14.08 per thousand. It would be $14.86, so 80 cents a thousand. So $80 per 100,000. Questions? Just to, I like to put this out there so people know, this is our county with our tax rates. Central Square is the second line, so we are pretty much the lowest except for APW and Sandy Creek as compared to the rest of the township. And this is our tax rate, as you can see over those same set of years, from 2017 to this year. So our tax rate has been slowly decreasing. Questions?
The number of unfunded mandates
It's increasing.
keeps going up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, now they're not running the foundation aid formula fully, so it's a catch-22. More to come.
Your first bulleted slide said it all, because they're touting it as we're giving you 507 million more, but the way we're gonna monkey with the foundation aid, we're basically taking all of that away. So, but that's not what's in the headlines, and the headlines would instead be 500 million more money going to education. So.
That's why you're not gonna.
Right. But I have been happy with some of the channels. They really are going out and saying that the foundation aid is not what it would be.
Look, it's still better
Yeah.
than Cuomo's way of doing that
Right.
dance and then us really not knowing until having to
Right.
advise scenarios.
And that's kind of what it's turning out to be this year, which it has not been for what, 2 years now? They have given us our numbers right in January. And now I think it's going to be a little bit of a dance as they go back and forth on it.
Awesome, thank you, Maureen. All right, so moving along to item E, I'd like to take items E1 through E3 in its entirety. May I have a motion?
All motion.
Thank you. Sorry, so that's Christie and Randy. All those in favor?
Well, hang on one second. Tom, did you want to discuss a little bit about the school psych position? Thank you.
So on here, we have an additional school psychologist, and as I just talked about unfunded mandates, we have something that every organization that I've seen is questioning the state putting it out without actually saying to the school districts, hey, we're going to help you with that. And what I mean is, there was a rule for manifestation hearings, and so it does two huge things to school districts. So what that basically means is when you have a manifestation hearing, that means that a student has been suspended, and if the student is a special education student, you have to have a manifestation hearing. So I conduct the majority of the superintendent hearings. When a student is an IEP, then Chrissy Smith is made aware of that, and then the CSE committee, depending on what building the student is in, we have to have a manifestation hearing. So we start the hearing process, and then I have to leave the room. The Committee on Special Education, or the CSE, they come in to see if there's a correlation between the student's behavior, what caused the suspension, and what's on the student's IEP, what the student's disability is. And when they do that, it used to be, okay, student has done this, even if they've been out of school suspended for 10 days, you can suspend the student out, but then you have to do your best efforts to be able to have a manifestation hearing. But when they say best efforts, they got to understand, you only have a limited amount of school psychologists, right? One in each building. So you have to have a team. So unfortunately, what happens is that back then, you would say, okay, it's going to take at least 3 days to be able to get subs in, to be able to figure out who's available, to be able to pull that group together, and sometimes it was longer. So the state came out and supported the federal government recent change that's in effect right now that says if you have a student and they've been suspended, then they have an IEP, and they have already been suspended in school or out of school, same thing, for 10 days, and half days of in-school suspension and out of school still count as a full day, which is crazy math. But a half day of suspension actually counts as a full day. So once they meet that threshold, what the state said was that you can't remove a student from the classroom unless the student caused severe bodily injury, which is they throw something, bounces off the teacher's head, teacher's got a headache and what. No, that's not considered severe. Even a bloody nose wouldn't be considered severe to the state, not to me or Central Square, but to the state. So severe bodily injury, drugs, or weapons. And so, unfortunately, that would mean, so when they were rolling this out to all the superintendents, I asked the question to state that on a Zoom. Chris Todd was on, all the superintendents, and it's the same thing they did in Onondaga County. I said, what if a student threatens they're going to kill the teacher, kill the teacher's family? They said, no, they actually have to carry that out. And so you look at this and you wonder why people across New York State are saying they're leaving the teaching profession. They're leaving the administrative. It's not just the teachers. I've got my admin that are dealing with irate parents to the wee hours of the morning and emails. You would see the times it would make your head spin, and phone calls to really late at night. And they're making those. So it's falling on teachers. Absolutely. They're the ones that are right there in the classroom in ground zero. But it's really impacting everybody, bus drivers, everybody with this behavior. So what they're essentially saying is before you can remove the kid from that classroom, you have to conduct a manifestation hearing. Now, we've tried to find some creative ways to say, okay, if a student is going to hit that threshold, be ready to do possible Zoom from a place in the building. But we don't have a lot of places, and it has to be in the building. Because whatever's on their IEP, they have to be able to get. If they have a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, they have to have that person in that room. But then becomes a problem. I won't say what building, but it was a secondary, so it was either the middle school or high school. I want to be very general here. Had a situation just today where the student had exceeded, but the kid's running out of the room that we were going to put the kid in. And so basically, what are we supposed to do? So this one position for the school psychologist is helping us expedite those manifestation hearings, because I feel for the parents, I feel for the teachers when we have to evacuate classrooms because there's a student, and I'm not downplaying what that student could be going through. I have a heart, our teachers have a heart, we understand that, but we still have 25 other kids in that class that deserve an education, and the teacher deserves the right to be able to have an environment that's conducive for teaching, and everything that Aaron presented on with the blue and the green, all of that goes out the window, and they're evacuating classes all the time. So that's the first part of the need to have that school psychologist, because our school psychologist now also, the unfunded mandate is that every time you have that manifestation hearing, you also have to conduct an FBA. That's a functional behavior assessment, and it can't be less than 6 weeks. You have educated people that do a great job. You have the teacher, you have the special ed teacher, you have the counselors, you have the admin, you have that table right there, and they can say, after 2 weeks, this isn't the right placement. State says, nope, you got to have a minimum of 6. Well, that's great. So now you got parents going nuts, calling board members, calling people, calling everybody. This isn't fair. What are you doing? Why should the 99% be impacted by the 1%? And it's difficult because I understand what they're saying. That I even said this before. I have a child on the autism spectrum. I said to my wife early on, before he was able to do great things, thanks to great special ed teachers, that if he wasn't able to, and he was constantly distraction to all those other kids in the class, as much as I would want my kid mainstream, I would ask to him be in a special program, because that is not fair for all the other kids and the staff. So it's that level of work that's now been thrusted on our school psychs. There's no way that they would be able to do both of those things, expedite a manifestation hearing, but also conduct these functional behavioral assessment that could potentially have the student in the right atmosphere. Got another elementary situation. I won't tell you what building. Aaron Phillips was covering that building, but we also had other admin covering other buildings, so I'm not going to say what grade level. Young child that was trying to bite her, kick her, punch her. And look, at the end of the day, we're trying to get through the functional behavior assessment and jump through all the hoops the state makes us do, but all the while, listen to the teacher, reassure the teacher, and all those parents that are complaining, this is an everyday occurrence. And so the state comes out with very unrealistic expectations, these unfunded mandates that cost the district a significant amount of money, that if we ever we're going to be good for next year with the budget. However, if we ever get into a situation where it becomes really tight, we're not going to be able to get rid of those mandated things, like something like that. And then we're going to look at our reading programs. We're going to look at administrative positions. We're going to have to look at all the things that we need to do to function. Because we're not going to be able to get rid of the staff members that are associated with those unfunded mandates. So it's a kind of a long version to answer your question, but that school psychologist will definitely help us in expediting to remedy the situation that I just mentioned.
So Tom, describe me, because we have 6, right? You just put out a post today on Counselor Week, so I now know that we have 6
counselors.
We have 6 psychologists. Right?
Well, we have way more than 6 counselors because...
No, psychologists.
School psychologists?
Yes.
Yes.
We have 6, so describe to me a day. What is this one extra person? Describe to me a day what our 6 school psychologists do. What's their schedule?
Okay,
so what are they doing?
Yep. So what they're doing is the school psychologists do all special ed evaluation testing. That's on them. So they're testing, right? Anytime a parent says, I want my child to be evaluated, teacher thinks that there's something going on here, right? It's far beyond, we need the kid to be tested. So that's one part of it. But then also it's scrambling to have these manifestation hearings. So we have a significant number of special education students that keep coming to the district. So I know we're saying that our enrollment's kind of plateaued for the longest time. It's gone down. What hasn't gone down are the number of students being identified and coming to the district. At Central Square Middle School and Paul V. Moore, the increase in IEPs in 504 from 2019, 2020 to 23, 24 is an increase of 86 students that have come in. So that means that's 86 annual testing. That is manifestation hearings are skyrocketing. And again, I'm not putting a target on special education kids' backs, but for you to ask me, what are they doing? They're constantly having to convene manifestation hearings for all of these suspensions that special education students have been doing from elementary straight up. So once you start evaluating a student, you can't stop that evaluation. You just can't, or it becomes void. So now all of a sudden they get a phone call and say, we just got a kid that threw a chair, didn't hurt anybody, but it's out of control. We need to suspend that student. We have to convene a committee with a school psychologist, but those school psychologists are constantly involved in the process of testing students. So to answer your question, unfortunately, and they're doing functional behavioral assessments, because it's a requirement now for anybody that has manifestation. So the numbers have skyrocketed. So their days are pretty crazy right now. I have Lynn Dowler here in the audience. Lynn, you represent the group. You're more than welcome to come to the podium, because these are the people that are coming to you saying our job has been inundated. And I know you're not a fan of public speaking, but I see you making your way to the podium because you represent them. Lynn, do you want to come up? Because this is a regular occurrence of them saying, and it is, and we put a tremendous amount. Go ahead, Lynn.
I'm at the podium. Thank you. Actually, in all seriousness, it's difficult for me to be serious, but I don't have any data. I just know that I've been in the classroom for 30 years, and things have changed. We need a lot of help. If you're really going to ask me for my opinion, I could probably add 8 more jobs to the list, but I won't. The workload is incredible. The support that the teachers need just increases and increases and increases, and the students are affected. And I think that's where we all look at, the students being affected. And I don't know if this is the answer, but it can't hurt. So I'm in 100% support of this, and I think a lot of people here are too. And they probably have more data than I have, but in the trenches, we need some help.
To be able to speak up, because you represent them. So the school psychs have come regularly. Chrissy Smith, our director of special education. They come to myself. They've come to Aaron. They've come to Kristen Enright, because there's not enough hours in the day for them to be able to conduct the businesses that they have to do. And the floor dropped out when the state said, oh, and by the way, when you're doing a manifestation hearing now, it's a requirement that you do an FBA. And it's not even for just kids with an IEP. It's all the hundreds of students with a 504 that's not even considered special education. So what they did was they just literally required us to increase the number of school psychologists to be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish, because not only, just go back to the testing part, there's a time limit. So if a parent says, I want my child to be tested for special education, evaluated. Chrissy, so they're not just hearing from me. What is that time limit that state ed, the law is in place that has to be evaluated? And what happens when they go beyond the 60 days, because they're inundated with all the things we just talked about? Right.
Yeah, so we're on a short time frame. So like what Tom said, IEPs. Sorry, so that's 86 students, but that's 86 evaluations. That's a minimum of an additional 86 meetings a year, but most kids don't have just one meeting a year. They have program reviews, manifestations, an additional piece of testing. So if each of those kids have 2 to 3 meetings a year, and you multiply that, you can see how it's an increased workload, in addition to students who have counseling on their IEP, crisis support. I know at the high school and at the middle school, there's many students who are in crisis throughout the day, and our social workers do work with those students, as do our counselors, but our school psychologists also have relationships with many of them because they provide counseling. So sometimes they're the ones who are called in for an emergency, or if a student has a risk assessment that they need completed. Our school psychs help facilitate that with the social workers at times.
So I'll just chime in quickly. I've heard from a lot of the teachers, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, about the significant amount of change that has occurred in the student behavior. Obviously, there's a very quick thing that comes to mind in COVID, and the at-home education, getting these kids back into a routine and that not being, but with this new mandate, the school psych, I have a question related to that, but as a general statement, I feel like New York State, by doing everything that they're doing, continues to take tools away from the teachers, the districts, in order to control this behavior. And, by doing things and just putting more paperwork and more steps into the process in order to discipline anyone, it's made it, a lot of students feel entitled. They're entitled to be here. You can't make me go home, and you got to jump through 17 hoops to get me to go home, and I know that. And, in some cases, it's almost emboldened them to behave in worse manners than, from what I've heard from some of the teachers, in 3 years, there's chaos in the hallways. I mean, I've had teachers tell me, I could describe it for you, but the best way for you to understand it would be to just walk through the hallways for an hour and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so,
Agreed.
100%. And so, but a lot of that, the expectation at home sometimes, from what I hear, is that needs to happen at school. At school, obviously, we want that to happen at home. It's no different than the reading scores. If people are getting worked with, students are getting worked with at home, that comes out in the classroom. The teachers can only do so much, and I feel like they've had just about every tool taken out of their tool belt to maintain control in the classroom. And with all these extra jumps and hoops and everything that you're referring to, adding another school psych, I guess that leads to my question. So what would the responsibility for this one person be? Because obviously they're not going to jump around, efficiency-wise, what's the plan?
So when Cuomo originally said we're going to cut school aid 20%, right? And ours 68 million state aid. So what we did was we got rid of a full-time through attrition, but we cut a full-time position for a school psych. So now what we'll be able to do is have, Chrissy, do you want to say it? So again, they're hearing right from you.
Sure, so it would be, I think you referenced, did you say 6 earlier? So we would want, we have 7. So right now we have someone who's split part-time high school, part-time middle school, and I don't think he could be stretched any thinner. So it would be 2 full-time at the high school, 2 full-time at the middle school. So that person's day, just talking to one of our school psychs earlier, he said his day started, he got here 20 minutes before the contractual time because a parent had to meet before they went to work. That's what worked best for the parent. So he's here before his day starts, and when he was meeting with me, it was far after his day had ended. He meets with students who need IEP counseling. He does evaluations. So students need initial evaluations, and then every 3 years, we're required to do updated testing for evaluations as well. In addition to, say a student has been getting speech and language services, and a parent says, I have some processing concerns. I want more testing now. We have to provide updated testing for that. Coordinating CSE meetings. So today, with the issue at the middle school, we need a meeting right now. Right now, drop everything you're doing and work on scheduling the meeting right now. That happened 4 times last week for the high school. 4 times in, I think it was 24 hours, Heidi, that we had to drop everything, schedule, and convene a meeting as soon as possible. So, it's working on those types of things. It's also so our students who attend BOCES programs, BOCES oversees their programming, but our school psychs still have to do all the updated testing. And they don't have special ed teachers who do testing at BOCES, so they have to do the testing for the teacher and as a school psych for any students who are at BOCES.
Rather than a new position, can we incorporate anything with a partnership with BOCES for them to handle those responsibilities?
They don't, BOCES doesn't have, there's no service that BOCES does.
Well,
No.
my
And that's the
question-
case for
my
OC
question
and
is-
BOCES as well.
Is one enough?
We
Wayne,
feel,
do you want to answer?
we feel that it has to be.
Well, my question is this, maybe this is a brainstorming, I don't know what you want to call it, but we are so spread out miles. Like I will say this point blank, I don't think one is enough, period. And, Lynn would probably pat me on the back for that, because I don't think one person could run from the high school. Putting an additional one is not going to help the high school or the middle school or the elementary schools. I think we really need to look at more than one.
So I think
I'm not saying today,
No,
but
I
I'm saying
I
as a
hear you,
thought.
but here's the deal. We also still have to be able to balance the budget. And so when I said a little while ago was that it's going to get to the point, we're going to be fine for next year. I've had conversations with Maureen. We've had a series of good decisions to be able to put us in a spot, to be able to we had reserves, we had things that we could do. But if it ever gets in a situation like when Cuomo said we're going to cut 20%, there's going to be things that just can't get cut. There's going to be things that are mandates that no matter how much we disagree with them, we can't. So then we're going to have to look at other things. But for Randy, your question, I had the same parents say to me when I was down there at the Loop on Monday, because I told the parents over the weekend, yep, I get it. Some people don't realize it's drop and go, it's congested, it's dangerous. So I was there, and I had at least 6 parents say, hey, you know what? We would 100% support 3 special patrol officers at the high school.
Well, and I say this because my parents always used to tell me this: you either pay now or you pay later. You either pay for the kids and school, or you're paying their prison sentence.
And I get
one
it,
or the
but
other.
the
So
job
you
that I
either
have
pay
with
now or pay
Maureen
later, and what's
is
the cost
balancing
going
the
to be?
budget.
Well, and I understand that, but to a
Randy,
degree-
we've got to understand too, this isn't a private business where we can just say, you know what, things have changed in the world. We are going to charge $20,000 a student instead of 15 because that we can't just, the pot is what it is. And so as much as we would love to provide that, I would not be in support of adding more than one at this point. I mean, I
I
was
didn't
wondering.
say to add more than one.
I'm not-
I'm just
I
saying
understand.
it needs to
But I
be a
think like as a
brainstorming look
discussion,
at.
like to
Right,
start to look
exactly.
at what more,
One doesn't fix it.
right,
Then
then we
you've
might
done
have to
nothing.
come back.
Right.
But I think for today, like, I think after hearing from everybody here, maybe we can all agree on, yeah, one is definitely needed, and then maybe we can revisit to see,
That I
did one
really think that it needs to be
solve?
looked at. If more is needed, it might be something to look at.
Correct, later on, but for today, I think,
Right.
we have to provide some sort of solution to the issue.
And
that we
if
have,
with the
so.
boards, not only this board, but all boards in New York State, what they can do is lobby together to say, for all of these things, example, case in point, what we're dealing with right now, it's very easy for the governor, it's very easy for the New York State Education Department, the Board of Regents to say, we're dealing not with a pandemic of COVID right now, but a pandemic of what's on the students and what they're going through and all of this stuff. Then give us grants that operate very similar to our title grants that we're going to get every year that we can say, okay, there's the additional, you know what I mean?
Right.
100%.
And that's where
where the
we
school
need
sucks.
to nail that to the cross, is going in that route.
Correct. And so the superintendent group, we're heavily lobbying for this. Because what we're saying is you just put regulations in place that now require us to have additional staff to be able to be in compliance. Because if you're not, the number one lawsuits against school districts are special ed related. So they'll get an advocate. We've been sued. We've had to make concessions on things. When at first the parent says, no, you know what, it's not safe for my kid to be in school. It's not fair for the other kids. I will agree to this at home, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden we do what they're in agreement. Well, yeah. And then all of a sudden they get an advocate and we're being sued. And we lose. So I hear what you guys are saying. I'm glad you're asking good questions. This has never been a board that has rubber stamped things. I know some boards that rubber stamp things. One personally that I know of that I wish they wouldn't rubber stamp, because it impacts me. But this board does a really good job bringing up and asking these questions, because at the end of the day, it is about balancing a budget. It is about being creative, but it's also the state has to say, okay, we got to hit pause. We're putting all this stuff out that's burdening the districts. without saying, okay, we're going to give these breaks. They're doing great things for Micron. Billions of dollars if you do this and deferred taxes, but they need to do this.
Right.
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is looking to be hired July of 2024?
Correct.
So, this is a bigger problem than just one school psychologist. Is it an opportunity now to pause the approval or denial of the position to talk about the bigger issue and how we can attack it as a school district?
So if we hit pause, right, it's not going to change the fact that the state, they're not backing up on this.
No,
They're
I understand that piece. I just think that as a district as a whole, we need a better strategy than adding one psychologist to the problem that we have across the entire district with how we manage this issue in all of our classrooms.
the board can has the power to pause if you want to, that's fine. But it's also the idea that we have staff members that are demoralized in the fact that they see the additional work that needs to be done.
I don't
with all
deny
these-
any of that. It absolutely exists.
But if the board wants to hit pause on this, it just will, we're early right now in the interview season. So the unofficial interview season really takes place in about, I would say in about a month and a half.
Okay.
That's when you're gonna see districts scrambling all over the place. And really what it comes down to is poaching Syracuse City, because what they do every year is they say, oh, we're gonna fix the budget, so we're gonna lay off 120 staff members, and then only to then try to hire them back, but they go to other districts. So I would say in about a month and a half, it's gonna be pretty competitive on trying to get a really good school
And
psychologist.
that's my concern, is to make sure that we have a quality person that understands the environment they're coming into and what our goal is as a district. And I don't know if that's all been laid out yet. But I
Correct.
think we need that.
So we're not going to hire somebody right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to post for the position, and then we're going to hope, because it used to be every time we put a position like this out there, we would have 100 applicants. Right now we have like 2 or 3. When we had a special ed opening, we literally had 0 for a probationary high school position for what? What would you say? 2 months? 3 months?
And
0.
So, Tom, are you essentially saying by approving it now, we would be able to post it?
Oh, yeah.
And then have more time to evaluate
100% to get the
candidates?
best
So
that we
that's
can
what-
get.
That's
Because
fair.
if we don't do it until next month, for instance, for further discussion, then your back's against the wall, we got to get the posting up, because now we've got prime hiring season upon us, and we don't
I
have
can
a-
tell you, out of the 9 component districts, 6 of them are desperately trying to hire at least 2 school psychologists each and 3 counselors. Like, they're struggling right now, and we're all fighting each other to try to compete for those
Right.
positions.
And part of the problem with hiring school psychologists, also just because my background's in school psychology, is College of St. Rose is closing down. RIT has discontinued their program. So we have SUNY Oswego, which all of them have already committed to Syracuse City because they give an exponentially, we can't even compete with it. They pay off their student loans for them and give it a super high rate. And then Roberts Wesleyan College, who I've already reached out to, and then I think University of Buffalo might be the other one.
So more than likely, where they would come from is people that have completed the time requirement for whatever those incentives are at Syracuse
That they
City,
can
that then
leave.
they can go leave and
Potentially, yeah.
find a district
That
they
is
feel more
correct.
comfortable. So,
And I'll just, maybe just put a parking lot item into it, because I was talking to my mom. My mom's a retired high school counselor, and Onondaga County put in a satellite mental health unit across the street from the school, and that it would help with the counseling services that a student might need, where I need to talk to somebody, or somebody was just, they'd refer them across the street, they'd go, and it would just spread out. You know, I just looked up, Oswego County has 100 therapists. You know, it might be time for them to open something here in
So
Central
you bring up a
Square.
really good point. So I don't want to knock Oswego County, but the difference between Onondaga County and here, so I've been covering elementary buildings, and I've been seeing kids in crisis and whatnot. Onondaga County is the McMahon Ryan Center, and they've got everything, resources that they're available. Everything is there. We don't have anything like that in Oswego County. So when it comes to competing to try to get people to come, you've got other school districts doing signing bonuses. They've got things where if you can get somebody to come here, well, he'll be an incentive to be like, It's getting so competitive right now. Lemoyne, all of these colleges have record low numbers for teachers, for school psychs, as Chrissy just said, for counselors, and it's cyclical. So maybe in 8-9 years it'll turn around and people will realize for retirements or whatnot, it's the way to go. But right now, it's a dogfight to try to get candidates. And we have
I'm
amazing
not saying
teachers.
candidates, I'm saying get.
No.
get a
I
clinic.
hear what you're saying. To get a clinic,
yeah.
A
we've
satellite
tried.
clinic.
We've tried
or-
to do. The name is, I'm losing it right now. Maureen, help me out. Where some of the districts actually qualify to have
It's like they can write prescriptions. Pulaski has it.
health
Yeah.
center. The health
Pulaski
center.
has
Yep.
it,
And so it's great because the kids never actually have to go home. Like if they're not feeling well, they can go, boom, they looked at, no, you don't have strep, whatever, you go right back to class. I have been looking into that. I had numerous meetings with Oneida Health. What's Oneida Health, right. Oswego Health. With Bacchus, the whole 9 yards, and when it looks like we're going to get room on that, they're like, well, no, because you have a place right here in the village that they can go to or whatnot. An urgent care type facility, but to your point, that would be amazing for this county to be able to get something like that.
Yeah.
A parking lot, but to me, you'd be able to get some services without having to pay for it.
Right, we wouldn't have to pay
Through our county.
I would
tax
love
dollars.
it. These are things that we've asked for.
Yeah.
The superintendents, and they're just nowhere near the services in Onondaga County. And it's a shame because these kids deserve the same services that county has. And I get it, it's much larger, but still.
So, going back to this, does anyone have any expressed interest in having me separate out these items, or are we good clustering them together after the
What's
discussion?
Connie gonna do? Wasn't she on the list?
Yeah, she is. She's an IEP she's working in special ed, isn't she, Connie? Yeah, she's a long-term sub. Yeah.
I saw that.
every day.
Right. So, and I just had one other question about some of the things. I don't have any problem, everybody else can speak for themselves about taking them together, but I did see in the retiree list that we will be losing 2 additional school counselors, and so I just wondering whether we have a plan. I know we had some conversations about there's going to be some major revamps, not necessarily in terms of personnel, but efficiency and making sure things are being done. And so with now having, it still would be 5 counselors in the counseling office, or 6?
What we have right now at the high school.
5, right. So we would have 3. More than half of them would be either 1 year under their belt, which we just hired one, or 2 brand new ones. So okay, right, okay. But I'm just saying, with respect to Central Square, we'd have 3 new counselors, and so I just didn't know, if we've been talking about planning with respect to that. I mean, having the issues that we had last summer and then having 3 new people in the.
Correct, so there's going to be a presentation at a board meeting in the spring of everything that they've done at the high school. Because you guys asked for that, that's happened. I can tell you right now, I've already gotten numerous compliments from parents. Our new school counselor put on a financial aid night for 19 parents. That's great, because normally people are disengaged.
Yeah.
But she is, I believe, 27 years. Again, it's one of those Syracuse City opportunities to say, all right, I'm done with that. I want to come to a place where, and again, the hallways here is different. Yes, right now the middle school is inundated with behavioral issues. Many of them are from some students with extreme special education issues that it is increasingly difficult for our middle school staff and our administration to be able to function. And then the state comes out and rolls out these rules. It's very frustrating.
So we're going to get a presentation about the changes that have been made and all that stuff? Perfect.
All right. So is everybody okay with me clumping together E1 through 3, or does anybody want me to separate them out?
I think that's the motion we have on the table.
Yeah, we already have the motion
Yeah.
in second, so you just take a vote.
All right, perfect. So all those in favor? All right, perfect. That motion passes. All right, moving on to items F. We'll take that in its entirety from F1 through F9. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, you can choose, Pearl. All those in favor? All right. That motion passes as well. So moving on to item G, we'll open that up to Sophia first, our student board representative.
All right. I just wanted to touch on something that the district has adopted, brought to the attention by Mrs. Morgan, one of our second grade teachers. She did a wonderful presentation to the National Honor Society group about the Change for Hope through Griffin's Guardians. Quick, easy way to raise money for childhood cancer. And actually, each school in Central Square District has, some sort of form for this Change for Hope. So there's a competition in the high school for which grade level can raise the most money. Buckets in the middle school, and even at MH Millard Hawk, they have some sort of little buckets in the lunchroom for, the children to bring in their extra loose change, which is such a great thing that as a district as a whole, we've, brought Griffin's Guardians in and, raise awareness for the childhood cancer, which we haven't actually done anything with Griffin's Guardians in the past few years. So it was nice to bring them back, into our community. So very appreciative of Mrs. Morgan, who, inspired a lot of the students here to act on that. Just another wonderful event that's happening at Millard Hawk, put on by the volunteers and the teachers, is the Sweetheart Dance on February 9th. They always do a great job for those events, so looking forward to that. And the Drama Club is going to be performing their Beauty and the Beast production the 8th through the 10th. They've been working on this for a few months, so I'm excited to see that. And very good work among all our athletes and our club members throughout the district. Thank you. Pretty good. I think at the last meeting I said we had the most amount of kids placed for states, and we have over 50 kids going to the state competition. That's going to be next week or the week after that. I believe the field trip's going to happen, but we're looking forward to it. It's the most we've had participate in states ever for DECA. Mm-hmm.
Great work.
Awesome job.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
So I'll open it up to our board members. Do any of you guys have anything you'd like to share?
I will share that I went to the 8th and 9th grade transition meeting. That was the same night as the financial thing. I thought it was great wealth of information provided. I thought it was well put, there was a lot of information. It was great. Got to tour the halls, ask questions. The only thing that was, I wish there was more people there. And not staff or administration. I wish there was more parents there. It was not as full as I thought it would be. Granted, I know a lot of people have high school kids already, so they probably wouldn't attend. They already know the process and everything. But other than that, I thought it was a great meeting.
Thank you for that. All right, Tom, it's all yours.
Just came from the art exhibit for our middle school students that was over at the Brewerton Public Library. Saw staff members. Casey Morey was there, Mr. Tackman was there, we had Mrs. Fishman that was there. I think maybe other board members may have popped down, those just were the ones that were there when I was there. But again, it was another demonstration of our talented students. Good news from the athletic department, the winter season is nearing its conclusion with a number of exciting things happening. Our varsity wrestling team won the league championship and will be sending several athletes to the class tournament as well as sectionals. Ricky Remenicki won the Salt City Dive Invitational, but jumping back to the wrestling, because this is pretty impressive. All right, and the last event that we had, which was significant, just want to give some names here. And 101 pounds was, I feel weird saying their weight, right? Like, I just feel like that should be. Yeah, I know. It just always seems odd, Sharon. 101, Widrick, 5th place. May was at 108 pounds, was 4th. 116 pounds was Perkins in 2nd place. 116 was Perks with 5th place. Dignan, I always say that. Digneen at 124 pounds was 4th. 131 weight class. Frank with 5th place. Ransom at 138 pounds was 3rd, 145 pounds. That was a no-show across the board. 152 was Bay, 6th place, 160 weight class. St. Clair with 2nd place. Waldron, 170, was 5th place. 190 pounds was Turo, 2nd place. Rocky Files, 250 pounds, was 1st place. And 285 pounds, Fleischman was in 2nd place. It was 1 champion, 5 finalists. Out of our 13 wrestlers competing, 12 qualified for sectionals. We had 1 senior, 5 juniors, 2 sophomores, 2 freshmen, 2 8th graders. Central Square team took 4th overall. Central Square team scored the most amount of individual match points in the tournament, a positive seed versus placement differential, meaning the kids placed higher than where they were seated in the bracket. That's awesome. Most Central Square losses were versus rematch students who they had already beaten. Bryce Sinclair, semifinal match, had the entire gym watching and was indisputably the match of the night. From everything that I've heard, parents from the schools were approaching him, telling him how amazing it was in his match, and they were so grateful. And just the positivity, and Allison had shared with me, it was just great to see the team really kind of rallying and supporting each other, and it was an amazing effort by the coaches. Senior Braden Wolf and junior Angelo Turo both made the New York State All-State 5th team in football. The varsity girls basketball team is currently ranked in the top 20 in Class AA in the state, and also first in Section 3, Class AA. That's phenomenal. They're having an amazing year. The boys basketball and cheerleading celebrated senior night on January 3rd. It was well attended. On Saturday, February 3rd, jump back, put that on twice. Congratulations to Paul V. Moore's 2024 Scholastic Art Award recipients, Dante Crum, Sydney Foote, Angelique Haberer, Susanna Hipp, Faith Hutnick, Kaya Johnson, Hayden Kroll, Faith Lederer, Hannah O'Neill, Nan Fan, Alyssa Revenaugh, Emma Rubar, Anna Russo, Miranda Ryan, Amelia Shanahan, James Torenzo, and Madison Tucci. Last one on Saturday. Nope, saying that yet again for the third time. One thing that I do want to say is very important, and we're going to be publicizing this. We're going to have it on the little cards that goes out to everybody in the community. But we are going to be changing our voting times for the two locations. That was normally 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's going to be 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. It has to be until that time. The reason why we made that change is at first, when we went from 4, or did we have 5 originally voting locations? 5 down to 2. We wanted to be able to keep it longer so people went to work. But we've been looking at the actual numbers, and it's great data that we received. From 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock across the entire district, only 3 people voted. And then from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, the only other people that voted were the people that worked the polls. So it's getting harder and harder to get poll workers. And the feedback that I've gotten from them is, I don't want to say that, I want to say they're more mature people, is like probably the correct way to say it. And it's tiring for them to have that shift. So by at least eliminating the 2 hours is really going to be able to help them. And again, we use the data, and we're going to let the community know that we're not trying to keep people from voting. We're very happy, without mentioning names, but to show them the numbers on why we came up. It's a data-driven decision. And now, what we always do is when the board approves people for tenure and they're here, we have them stand up. But before he does, I just want to just say that I often say that there are people that become the heartbeat of the school. So before Damon Villeneuve was in his role as the assistant principal, which he's done a phenomenal job doing, for a very brief time, he was our dean, basically, of discipline, and he was doing that before the state said, no, you can't have that anymore. They have to have an instructional evaluation part of it. But even before that, longtime business teacher, loved by students, and I've never seen someone get a crowd going with their face painted at homecoming, and so many students just flock to him. We are so fortunate to have Damon Villeneuve here in this building. So many people connect with him in so many different ways. He puts his heart and soul into everything. So with that, I'd like you to stand up, be recognized. Congratulations, Damon Villeneuve. I've seen him.
And he's a cook.
He's a great cook during COVID. I learned a lot of ways. My wife made me watch. If I could be more like Damon, she would say, but he would put out those Cooking with Villeneuve, which was pretty awesome, especially when parents needed some joy. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Yep.
So we're moving on to items H that we will separate out. So first up is items H1. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for H1.
Thanks, Christie. May I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Steve. All those in favor? All right, so motions H1 passes. Moving on to items H2, the approval of several overnight student trips. May I have a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
All right, we'll let those two battle it out. All those in favor? Thank you, that motion passes.
Aye.
Moving on to items H3, the approval of new course proposals.
I will motion.
Christie, second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor? Okay, so items H1 through 3 passes. Moving on to, we don't have a proposal session. That's it. Perfect. Moving on to items I, adjournment.
I will motion.
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Thank you, you too. All those in favor? All right. So we close the session at 7.